Change from Below. Bono's speech at Georgetown University, Washington, D.C.
Choose your enemies carefully because they define you. Make sure they're interesting enough because, trust me, you're going to spend a lot of time in their company. So let's pick a worthwhile enemy, shall we? How about all the obstacles to fulfilling human potential, not just yours or mine, but the world's potential? I would suggest to you that the biggest obstacle in the way right now is extreme poverty. Poverty so extreme it brutalizes, it vandalizes human dignity. Poverty so extreme it laughs at the concept of equality. Poverty so extreme it doubts how far we've traveled in our journey of equality. The journey that began with Wilberforce taking on slavery, and it will not end until misery and deprivation are in the stocks. Abolitionists, suffragettes, civil rights workers, and human rights activists. Social movements have always been powerful. But the subject of my speechifying tonight is going to point out what is the transformative element about this moment and this generation, and the chance that you have to rid the world of the obscenity of extreme poverty. Wouldn't that be a hell of a way to start the 21st century? Now, the history department might disagree with me, and I'll admit I only lasted a few weeks in college. But I don't believe that the 21st century started in the year 2000 on January 1. For large parts of the world, I think it started in 2011 with the upheaval of the Arab Spring. What happened in Egypt was that the pyramid, the traditional model of power, got inverted. The people at the top got upended, and the base had its say. Now, the Arab Spring is ongoing, it's messy, it's dangerous, and dangerously wrong in some geographies. But what I'm talking about is bigger than Egypt or any place else. It's a massive shift. It's one of those moments that in 100 years, the real historians, like those at Georgetown, will write about this phenomenon in the history books. The base of the pyramid, the 99%, is taking more control. The institutions that have always governed our lives, church, state, mainstream media, music industry, are being bypassed and weakened and seriously tested. People are holding them to account, us to account, demanding that they be more open, more responsive, more effective, or else. Here in the US, you've had the Tea Party hammering big government. You've had Occupy do the same to the jolly bankers of Wall Street. Social movements are competing, and we have to hope that the more enlightened ones will win the day. Social movements like the One campaign. And we're right, we're 3.2 million people at last count, asking the world to pay attention to the least amongst us, the very poorest of the world's poor, and the many things we can do to help them. And as I'll describe, we'll see things are happening in the developing world. But think about this particular moment. Not just Facebook in the heat of Tahrir Square, but the peaceful march across the world of mobile phones, across the parched lands of the Sahel and the dense rainforests of the Congo. Technology is transforming things. Everything's speeding up. Everything's opening up. Okay. Sharpen your pencils. I don't need to lecture you about change. Change is the air you breathe. You are it. I think change is your expectation. But what might it mean for you when the pyramid and a whole lot else gets turned up on its head, turns upside down on its head? What a huge opportunity that affords you if you're willing to seize it, because there's not just one big lever of power anymore. There's millions of levers or levers, and you've got a lot of them in your hands. And when we press them together at the same time, that's when things really start happening. But first, let me hit the brakes before some of you do, and let's acknowledge that it's brutal out there. It's brutal out there. And by there, I mean here, right here in America. The economy is still in a rough shape, and that slashing sound you hear is a big pair of scissors bearing down on the federal budget. Defense cuts, safety net cuts, foreign aid cuts, and all these cuts coming if we drive over this fiscal cliff, so-called. And cuts, they hurt. Somebody bleeds. The aid cut alone would mean that nearly 275,000 people won't get the AIDS treatment they need, resulting in over 60,000 deaths. 250,000 more children become AIDS orphans. Real people, real bleeding. So that's why you'll hear us in the One campaign making the case that cuts shouldn't cost lives. Cuts can't cost the lives of the poorest of the poor. It shouldn't be a hard case to make, but it is right now. In the halls of Congress, in the Senate, maybe even here in Healy Hall. But I put it to you, we must not let this economic recession become a moral recession. That would be double cruelty. You know, it doesn't just take away your chances here at home, this recession, but it might therefore take away your generation's shot at greatness in the wider world.